Hall of Famer John McClain with us, 365 Sports. Paul Catalina, Craig Smoke, and I'm David Smoke. John, thanks for your time. So, did the Texans get it right?
Oh, I think without a doubt, it was the most exciting draft the Texans have ever had. Time will tell if it's the best right now. The best was in 2006, Charlie Kessley's last year general manager. Gary Kubiak's first as the coach, first pick was defensive end Mario Williams. Second, DeMeco Ryan. They got 2 starting offensive tackles and a tight end, and that 5 starters from that draft, and then a reserve that lasted a long time. But when they took C.J. Stroud, which they should have done, but they had stayed so quiet about it, the longer they stayed quiet and didn't leak anything, the more people thought they were going in another direction, and I fell for it. And when they announced that they were drafting Stroud, 7,000 people at their celebration at a place called Miller Outdoor Theater just went crazy because everybody knew that was their biggest need. Well, then when they traded back up to the 3rd spot with Arizona to take Will Anderson, everybody's just in hysterics because they couldn't believe it. Texans have never made bold moves like that. And I told people, because nobody would realize this unless they were a dinosaur like me, there hadn't been that kind of excitement for a first-round pick in Houston since 1978 when Oilers coach Bum Phillips engineered a trade with the Buccaneers for the first pick so he could take Earl Campbell.
John, how quickly do they expect CJ? Do you think CJ Stroud starts week 1, or is that maybe a Case Keenum thing? And how quickly do they work in some of these other guys?
Well, I'll tell you, Will Anderson will start from day one because he was the best defensive prospect, and a lot of people had him rated as the top player on their board over Bryce Young. And once Jalen Carter's character issues surfaced and he plunged all the way to number 9, it became apparent Anderson was the top prospect, defensive prospect. And so he'll start right away. And they got other players. I remember when they took Xavier Hutchinson in the 6th round, I'm like, oh, I forgot about him. I watched him burn Baylor, Texas, a lot of Big 12 schools. But he didn't work out well, and he ran slow. So he was available. They traded to get a 6 to get him, and I think that was a great pick. C.J. Stroud, he played 2 years. He played great. He played his best games in the last game of each season. The Rose Bowl against Utah after his redshirt freshman year. Last year, they almost pulled off the big upset of Georgia. He was fabulous. And so they'll never say this, of course, but if he's not starting the first game, it'll be a shock because we're talking about, do they pencil in Carolina and Houston to play the first game when that game's scheduled for Charlotte? Well, if one of them's not starting, it'll lose its luster. So do they wait a few games in? And so I think he'll start from day one. I'm kind of surprised that the Colts are talking about Anthony Richardson being thrown to the wolves after only 13 games in college because, yeah, guys need to learn on the run, but sometimes they can play so bad it destroys their confidence. And you don't want to do that to a guy who has so much natural ability, but it's sure going to be fun in the AFC South because Stroud should start right away. Anthony Richardson probably going to start right away, and Will Levis, he won't start right away because they have Ryan Tannehill, but he'll be gone after this season. So I'm guessing somewhere over the last 9 or 10 games we'll see Levis, and we'll watch them see who's done the best job and who puts the best team around them and does the best job of coaching them. But it's weird. Trevor Lawrence has been in the league 2 years, and he'll be the senior starting quarterback in this division.
John, any particular impressions gathered just seeing the way that DeMeco Ryan's new staff, new faces operated? And along those lines, I mean, having heard the press conferences and things at this point, does it feel like there's a rejuvenation? Does it feel like there's some fresh sheets, some clean sheets, and there's this chapter that's beginning down in Houston now?
Absolutely, Craig. I'm writing a column for GallerySports.com for tomorrow about Hannah and Cal McNair, the owners, and how excited they are because right now with this draft, Started with DeMeco, but with this draft, taking care of their four biggest needs with their first four picks, starting quarterback and then edge rusher, they turned the corner. Now, it seems like so long since they've been good, but in January 2020, they beat the Bills in a wild card game here. So they've had 3 bad years because they told Caserio, tear it down and rebuild it. And they're not going to compete for the playoffs this year, but if they could double their win total and get 6, people would be really happy. They play the NFC South this year after playing last season. They played the NFC East and the AFC West, and it was tough. The schedule shouldn't be as difficult this year. And so I'm writing this column from the last snap of the 2020 season. It was like 2 days later that Sean Watson's agent told him he wanted to be traded. And the reason was Jack Easterby was the interim GM, and guys like him and J.J. Watt were worried that Easterby might become GM and make him even worse. So from that moment when he wanted out, through all the controversy off the field and the lawsuits and the trade and the losing and the firing of David Culley and Lovie Smith and then hiring Ryan and having this draft, it looks like if they haven't turned the corner, they're at least peeking around it.
I know that there were a lot of other picks as well, but one that put a smile on my face, and I know it put a smile on his face as well, was the local guy there in Tank Dell, Nathaniel Dell, who's a Florida guy originally, but made his way to U of H. I saw that, as everybody's probably seen, the DM that he sent to the social media team, like "Don't let me leave" or whatever it said. How excited are people to see him sticking around the city of Houston?
Well, Craig, if you are 5'8" and 166 and your name is Tank, then people are going to love you. And he scored more touchdowns than anybody in college football the last 2 years. He's a slot receiver. He's a great return guy. He's quick as a gnat. And people here love him. And he's a great quote. And he had one quote. Somebody said, they said, well, watching the tape of you, Tank, last season, you're explosive. He said, I'm so explosive. Explosive ought to be my nickname. And he just has one great quote after another. I did a column on him at the Combine about how much he liked staying in Houston. He started at one of the SWAC schools, I think, then went to junior college, then came to Houston when nobody wanted him. And he was a tremendous player for Dana Holgorsen, and fans here are really excited. And besides Xavier Hutchinson, who I mentioned from Iowa State, there's another, Henry To'oTo'o from Alabama, their leading tackler. I watched a lot of Alabama games this year because I wanted to see Bryce Young, because I thought the Texans had a chance to get him. Well, every time I'm watching them and I'm like typing and I'll look up and I'll hear the name Henry To'oTo'o and I look at the spelling and I'm going, man, I hope I don't have to spell his name, because there's 4 O's and 2 apostrophes. And sure enough, they drafted him. He was projected to go in the 3rd round. They got him in the 5th round. DeMeco Ryan, when he was defensive coordinator of the 49ers, they had lighter linebackers who could run like crazy, and that's To'oTo'o. And so it won't surprise me at all if he doesn't start as a rookie right next to Christian Harris, the 3rd-round pick from Alabama last year. And people couldn't be happier with that pick as well.
John, you gave the Cowboys a C+ in your report card. Why?
Mozzie, I thought Mozzie Smith to me was a 2nd-round player, and they got him at the bottom of the 1st round, and I understand that. I thought the highlight of the Cowboys draft to me was when Deuce Vaughn's dad, when they drafted him, and saw that video of him crying and everybody cheering for him and pounding him on the back. And then they let him go and call his son. And, we saw Deuce just kill Baylor. We saw Deuce kill a lot of people. And I think he reminds me so much of Darren Sproles. And anyway, I thought Deuce Vaughn was a great value pick. You put him in space, you throwing the ball out there, you don't need to let him run through the middle. I think he's going to be a terrific player for them. And then and the tight end, what's his name, Shoemaker. Yeah, he was a great. In another year, he might have been a higher pick. The Marvin Overshown in the third round, I thought that was a little high. But anyway, that's why I gave him a C+.
John McClain, GallerySports.com, 610 Sports Radio with us on 365 Sports. Is there any question that Caleb Williams right now is the favorite to go one next year?
He is, and Drake May from North Carolina, they're the two best. You never can tell what's going to happen with those guys. He's fortunate because he's playing with Lincoln Riley, and everybody loves him, and he won the Heisman, so he'll be under a lot of pressure.
John, what do you think about the Astros dealing with some injuries right now?
Oh, my goodness, Paul, they lose Jose Urquidy, a pitcher who pitched really well, and then he went on the injured list with a shoulder problem. And then Luis Garcia, he pitched great his last two outings, threw 8 pitches, felt a problem in his elbow. And he's gone on the 15-day IL. And so anytime it's an elbow, you're worried about Tommy John. And so they haven't said anything else about it. They're having to bring up minor leaguers. They're lucky that Framber Valdez, their ace, is pitching well. Christian Javier is not dominant like he was at the end of last year in the playoffs, but people think he will be. And then Hunter Brown, who still is technically a rookie, even though he pitched a lot in the playoffs and everything, he's 3-0. Last 3 outings, he's pitched great. But they didn't replace the depth. And Dusty Baker had a quote, talked about he wanted to acquire some veteran depth, but they didn't have a general manager. It was a long time between they hired when James Click turned down a 1-year extension, and they hired Dana Brown from Atlanta. And I kind of think that's an excuse. But, boy, they're going to have to make deals for somebody because Lance McCullers is still not ready. So they have 3 starting pitchers who are injured, and that's not good.
John, what were your thoughts on the Falcons grabbing Bijan at number 8 overall?
Well, Craig, that's one of the few I got right. And I think that they're going to be playing throwback football because Tyler Algier, he had barely over 1,000 yards last year, which was good because he didn't start right away. And you guys know you need to. Well, Robinson's such a great receiver, they'd be foolish not to use him in that capacity. So I imagine Arthur Smith is pretty creative as an offensive coach, that we will see instances where they're both in the backfield, and then Robinson will shift into the slot, or he'll go in motion, or he'll come out of the huddle playing wide receiver. And I haven't seen a linebacker who can cover him. So they're going to run the ball a lot. They're going to throw to Robinson. I thought the pick they made, and I didn't understand Detroit taking Jahmyr Gibbs when they did, but then when they traded DeAndre Swift going into the last year of his contract, and they didn't want to re-sign him, trade him to Philadelphia, then the Gibbs pick made more sense. Jamal Williams scored 17 touchdowns for him last year. He went to New Orleans, and DeAndre Swift scored 8. He was traded to Philly, so 25 touchdowns that they had last year are gone. So and they scored a lot, but Jahmyr Gibbs is like Bijan Robinson. He's going to get the ball in a lot of different ways. The offensive coordinator, they're going to be very creative.
John, the atmosphere in Kansas City seemed to be electric, and I know that it's been electric in a lot of different places, but did that seem to be about as good as you've seen in a long time?
Well, what I didn't like about it, you had the big stage, and then you had a monstrous crowd there, and then you had a monster crowd that wasn't even close to the stage, and that just seemed kind of a weird spot. The best one I've seen yet was in Nashville because they closed down their major artery of Broadway. They put a monster stage there, and they had, I remember, all along Broadway are restaurants and clubs with rooftop bars. So you had hundreds of people in rooftop bars hanging off of the different levels of the clubs and restaurants. And then they said they had 500,000 people there, but you're also really close to places where you can park and go to the bathroom. I always wonder, when you're in the middle of those crowds and you're drinking beer, what do you do when you go to the bathroom?
It's a good question.
I wonder that every time I see those monster crowds.
Yeah, I think you better not, be too far away from somewhere where you can go.
John, I don't think you should ask questions you don't want the answer to.
I think you do like that golden retriever puppy, what that puppy did on Daniel Jeremiah's suit.
Oh, yeah. John, thank you so much. We appreciate your time as always.
Guys, thank you very much. There
you go. John McClain, Hall of Fame columnist with us, GallerySports.com, Houston 610, and many other segments he does throughout the country. We appreciate his time with us